Why is society broken? Why is everybody always angry at each other? Everything you say is critiqued and said that you're saying things that you're not supposed to. Husbands are leaving wives. Families are being broken. There's abuse. There's disease. All of these things going on. What's the culprit? Most of mainstream media will tell you it is traditional values. And the most recent movement that is taking target in their crosshairs is the trad wife. Don't know what that is? Stay tuned. We're going to talk about it. So hashtag TradWife has been trending all over social media, and Esty Williams is a 24-year-old girl who has decided to stay home. Her husband's an electrician, and she's embraced the TradWife movement, and she's documenting this kind of transition in her life.
Okay, so I'm here to make a clarification video because of the big controversy going around about the term trad wife and the intent behind the term, as well as the intent behind my channel and what I post. If you are not familiar with the term trad wife, it is a woman who chooses to live a more traditional life with ultra-traditional gender roles. So the man goes outside the house, works, provides for the family. The woman stays home and she's the homemaker. She takes care of the home and the children if there are any. The misconception about the trad wife movement, it's not really a movement. Nobody's pushing it. People are typically just living it and maybe showcasing their lifestyle like me. And we believe our place, specifically us as individuals, believe our purpose is to be homemakers. It doesn't mean that we are trying to take away what women fought for. There are a lot of people trying to make this a sinister thing or put some other darker meaning behind the term trad wife. Nobody is doing that. No trad wife TikTokers are saying every woman's place is in their home. We as individuals are just choosing to be homemakers. That's all. Trad wives also believe that they should submit to their husbands and serve their husbands and family. And that triggers people because the words submit and serve, it makes women think that we're saying that we're less than a man. That's not what we're saying. Trad wives just believe that they are here as women for a different role, equally as important though. I can make another video on that another time. To be a homemaker and to have traditional values does not make us bad people. It's 2022, women should have the choice to be homemakers or not without being judged. And women should also be able to use the term trad wife, which means traditional wife, and not be shunned for wanting to be more traditional.
There are a lot of critiques that are coming against this. Some of them are kind of funny, some of them are a little bit ridiculous. We get like, why would you want to be involved in anything that is linked to Nazis?
That's a stretch.
That's an interesting take on this. Somehow, if we are doing anything that Nazis did, then we're as evil as Nazis. Well, Nazis wore clothes, Nazis ate food, they drank water, they had children, all kinds of things that Nazis did that weren't necessarily evil, because the association with something is not what makes something evil, it's the act that makes that evil. There's also some weird critiques about it being a sexual fetish, not a real movement, and that people who are doing this are just exploiting, trying to get like sexual fetish kind of things going on, which is really bizarre. And there's also just that it leads to abuse, which is generally kind of the most common attack that would come against this, is if you embrace this lifestyle, it's going to lead to abuse for you, and then it's going to empower those abusers to exert that authority and force me to live like you. And this is kind of the circular reasoning and the fear that really drives, I believe, the critique of movements like this. And I see a few problems with this that we just need to address. First off, the fear is false, right? So Esty Williams, I mean, she goes on record all the time, and all the traditional wives that I know who are able to stay at home and really invest in kids and household and things like that, they're not trying to get anybody else to live this way. Most of them are not even saying that this is the way, that they find so much fulfillment and everything out of this. This really stems from the division of labor, right? The division of labor in a household, which we'll talk about more in a second. But this fear that's driving the critique against this, I believe, is a fear of losing their own rights. I mean, we see this all the time. It's like, oh, if they're going to do this, then it's going to lead to this, it's going to lead to this, it's going to lead to this, and we kind of get to hysteria. A woman who wants to stay home and focus on this pool of the shared labor is not saying that you have to do that. They're also not saying that society should require women to do that. They do often have Christian beliefs that the role of a wife, the default desires of a wife would be to kind of work on these things, that they're more suited for these tasks. And they believe that because that's how they feel. So that isn't necessarily an assault at who you are if you don't want to do those things. You know, my wife and I, we divide labor of the household, and she takes on these things and I take on these things. They might not reflect exactly the division of labor between your household or your desired division of labor in a household that you want to have eventually if you're younger and haven't met that spot in life yet. But division of labor is just something that has to happen. We are communal creatures. We're pack animals, right? We've been created, I believe, by God to have relationships, and those relationships are to reflect our relationship with God. He's given us these relationships so that we would better understand Him. And we see this in the Bible when it talks about marriage in Ephesians, that this is not just a relationship that we have to procreate and keep life going, but it's a reflection of Christ and the church, that it was actually created so that we would better understand our relationship with Jesus. And these relationships are all designed so that we could better understand God and learn about our relationship with God, His relationship with us on an eternal perspective, not just on a temporal perspective of our relationships with one another. And this is where we find value in that. Now, just because I find value in that, if you disagree, doesn't mean that I'm saying that you have to do this or you should die.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
I have concern. I find joy. I find happiness. I find fulfillment in these beliefs that I have. I believe they're true. I believe that this is reality, that this is truth. But that doesn't mean that I believe that I have the right, nor do I have the desire to force you to do that. In fact, I actually have the opposite of that. I believe that I don't have the power to force you to believe this, and that if you don't believe it, it's going to cause you suffering. And I don't want to cause suffering. I don't want to enhance the suffering that is in your life by forcing you to do something that you don't believe. That doesn't mean that what you believe isn't causing you suffering either. It doesn't mean that what I believe couldn't cause me suffering. Like, these are all philosophical things. These are all conflicts that we can get into and that we have to kind of figure out on our own to some extent. The thought that trad wives, because they have a different division of labor, a different site of we're going to do these things at home and our husbands are going to do these things outside of the home, is somehow an assault to the way that you want to live your life, is really absurd. But what's behind this? And I think that, you know, when we look at who benefits from a society where men and women are both working, where we have fear laced in everything, that if we're dependent upon anybody, if we have vulnerable relationship, we're going to be abused. Those kind of things lead to isolation. Those kind of thought processes lead to trauma. They lead to separation and really lead to unhappiness. And this is the thing that's ignored by the mainstream media, by reporting on these kind of things, and really is the danger of kind of coming against the trad wife movement, the traditional values, things like that, and defining them as something that they're not. At the heart, I would say traditional values. Tradition is defined as a long-standing, you know, something, right? It's something that's been happening over time. And the family structure has happened to be very successful for society and for culture. We depend on people who we have relationship with and bonds to. And those people will, if brought together in a healthy way, allow all of us to progress further than we could have on our own. Because again, we are not isolated people. It's interesting to see the responses that come against this, the arguments that are made against it, you know, the link to Nazis, that it's redefined as an abusive thing, as though every housewife and all of history was abused by their husbands, is absurd. It's ridiculous. I know dozens and dozens and dozens. I know way more women who grew up, you know, they're older now, obviously, that grew up as housewives and enjoyed their life and found much satisfaction out of their life because of what they were able to accomplish with it, than I do women that were abused in that situation. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, but nor does it mean that it always happened. If we look at the force behind that, I do think that eventually what happens is, if we carry this out, and this is why the trad wife movement has increased, is we see the lie unravel. We see that the critique of traditional values is not accurate, it's actually overplayed. That what we're critiquing in traditional values, or what society is critiquing in traditional values, is actually the abuse of responsibility. And if we focused more on critiquing the abuse of responsibility, rather than the God-given structures for us to be able to function with one another, if we lived more in grace and community and serving one another, wives serving husbands, husbands serving wives, children obeying their parents, being raised up to then take care of those parents when they're older, our society would be a much better place. But it's the abuses, not the values, that cause the problems. Hopefully, this was informing to you. You guys can check it out. If you are a trad wife, give us a like, give us a share, tell us how that's working out for you. If you have objections, we would love to hear your comments, love to have a discussion with you. If you can like, share, or subscribe this video, we would be much obliged. Thank you guys for watching, and tune in for our next video.